Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us. My name is Laura Clemens, and I'm with Greystone Net and the moderator of this webinar. After the presentation, we'll take questions from attendees. To ask a question, please use the chat box on the right side of the screen. Please submit questions to me. Due to the size of attendance, attendees will be in listen-only mode to cut down on background noises. There will be a short survey at the end, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. Now I'd like to welcome our presenters today, starting with Paul Griffiths, General Manager, Digital Health Solutions Perficient, with a 20-year career in building brand awareness and web technology solutions. Paul sets the strategic vision for Perficient's digital health solutions and would act as the key client executive on this project. Over the last decade, Paul has worked with a variety of clients across the United States, giving him a national perspective on the challenges of hospitals, integrated health delivery networks, and health plans. Chandra Craven is a Senior Healthcare Strategist, Digital Health Solutions with Perficient. Chandra has over 20+ years in experience building digital marketing strategies in healthcare organizations, including Massachusetts General Hospital, Boston Children's Hospital, and Beth Israel Lahey Health. Stu Edens is Senior Digital Marketing Manager, Digital Health Solutions at Perficient. Stu brings more than 40 years of marketing and customer experience management to the table. Working in both digital marketing and website analytics, he helps clients discover the people behind the clicks. And now I'd like to turn it over to Paul Griffiths to begin this afternoon's presentation.
Hi, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Paul Griffiths. I'm with a company called Perficient. I will spend exactly 30 seconds explaining who we are. But you might have heard of us more previously. My company MedTouch joined with Perficient earlier this year as a continuation of Perficient's investment in thinking about digital consumer experiences for healthcare. And in fact, that's now why I'm running the digital healthcare solutions practice. So if you're not familiar with Perficient, here's my 30 seconds of context. Over 25 locations, about $500 million in revenue, about 4,000 colleagues, and a third of the work that we do is actually in healthcare pretty broadly. What I'm lucky enough to be able to do is think about some big picture themes that are happening in healthcare and talk to some other colleagues who are looking at the same problem from different angles. And so it really has informed our work. So we'll share a little bit of that with you, but just to give you a sense of the scale, if you're not familiar with Perficient, this is kind of wheelhouse of what we do. That being said, that was my 30 seconds on who we are. I want to talk a little bit about what's changing in the market. And if you have experienced any of the ups and downs because of COVID, you might be in one of places. I'll give some language and talk to some of these themes that we're seeing, but the central message that we want to get across today is that competition is going to be on the rise. And the reason that competition is going to be on the rise is we're seeing demand fall. Now, depending on where you are in your kind of journey of dealing with coronavirus and the outbreak, we have some clients who are definitely have seen the worst of the curve. We have others who are experiencing a surge right now. I think that the challenge is, regardless of where you are on that spectrum, the market for patients has been dramatically impacted by COVID. And you might have heard, this idea of a new normal. The challenge that we see is that patients are not going to come back in equal measure. And so this research, which the kind of figure on my right comes from a organization we have a lot of respect for, the Chartist Group. They're kind of thought leaders in terms of planning for hospital systems. The research that they've done really suggested that the market's going to shrink for procedures. And if you think about what that means, this kind of bell curve that is on the right hand of the slide, there is some pent-up demand. So if you have gone through perhaps the phase of shutting down and reopening elective procedures, there are a number of people who have been waiting, and there's a certain patient population that has demand that is unmet. But behind that, the majority of the market is just hesitant. Is it clean? Is it safe? We've seen a number of clients have to call around, actually take physician time to go and directly talk to patients to convince them it was safe to return. So there's hesitation in the market, and we see that playing a factor in consumers' decisions. And then even behind that, there's a part of the market that's really reticent, that's going to put off care until it's almost too late because they're so concerned about getting exposed to what they perceive could be a bigger threat. And then there's part of the market that's just going to exit, meaning either because their health conditions have changed, either because their financial positions have changed, and perhaps they're not able to afford a procedure, or perhaps they've lost their job and that procedure is no longer covered by whatever insurance they're on. It has become a much more complex conversation to be having. And my concern, and the reason that we wanted to put this webinar together and give you all some language and some vision for how to address this, my concern is that as the market shrinks and competition increases, the challenge is not just sending a message that we're open for business. The challenge is actually figuring out how you can identify each of these segments and speak to their felt needs. What we're seeing is now not just the need to communicate effectively to a population that's maybe concerned about their hip and should they have rehab, they have a surgery. We're now seeing that the population needs to be addressed where they are in terms of their fear about COVID and perhaps contracting something, again, worse than what they're dealing with. So the talk that we're gonna walk through today is really about thinking of journeys, not just being about getting people to a procedure. Now we have to deal with the reality that even if someone raises their hand and is committed, the likelihood that they will fall out and not follow through with that procedure is considerable and is something that's dynamic and changing. And this is kind of the market reality and the reason why we want to help you go back to your organizations and get people really understanding of the power of consumer journeys and why it's so critical. Because it's not just about getting people back, it's about keeping people from falling out of this appointment scheduling and elective surgery process. So that's kind of the critical part we're talking about today. As we kind of talk about this, it's me. Saw this morning news that Texas, now parts of Texas have canceled elective surgery because of the rise of the cases, which is just new. I don't think I've seen that happen, open and close again. But this idea of restarting elective procedures, it was clear to us that demand and capacity was not going to come in equal measure smoothly, meaning it wasn't that so easy to match the physicians or nurses or resources that you have, that those will come online and you can find patients and match them. And if you think about the number of priorities you have to balance now, you as a marketing communications team have to optimize offers by physician and service line and locations based on their availability. You have to figure out how to automate some patient engagement on capacity because you don't want to give away appointments to locations that are offline. You probably have to think about driving revenue to projected ROI. So there's a financial component that now we're seeing marketing departments really wrestle with, where they have to prove the investment of what they're doing. You have to measure and refine engagement to improve success. You have to make sure that these kind of campaigns and these engagements are actually getting patients to come in. You have to think now about outreach via channels that are preferred by patients, that when no one can see mass media or traditional, the digital channels becoming considerably more critical. And all this kind of comes down to getting the right appointment to the right patient to the right payer mix at the right time. And that is going to continue to be a road that's going to have some potholes and some speed bumps, and it's going to continue to require that we are flexible and adaptive and really understand who the patients that we're trying to reach are and how we can go and influence consumers' behaviors. And journeys are kind of critical to that. As we think about, preferences, I'll talk for a minute about channel preference. As we're seeing the movement away from patients just needing an appointment and willing to come in, we're realizing that there's a couple tools that need to be deployed at once, and now healthcare consumers are really focusing in on different ways to be communicated with and different preferences, mostly because they're living their lives even more online digitally. And so there's tools like direct mail, which is a great way to reach a population who's had some engagement with you and to help them understand where to go, what's open, what's available. You have promotional search, which of course is the idea of advertising on a search engine like Google, where you can really understand what consumer terms are trending and how to specifically address them. So promotional search becomes a way to understand what's happening in the market and respond to it. And then there's social media, where you're having a real-time interaction with a consumer. And actually all of these are different points of data that you can use to validate steps on the journeys. And increasingly we need to sequence a message across these platforms, because you certainly want to reach people if you know them, you want to entice them to give you more information, you want to engage with them where they are in social media. And this channel preference now is something that consumers are driving. So it is no longer sufficient just to think, I have an email program, I have a search program, I have a social media program. The complexity of getting people to stay in that journey to receive healthcare is paramount. And so that's a lot of what we'll explore today. With that, I believe I'll hand it over to my esteemed colleague, Stu Edens, and we're gonna do some audience engagement, because boy, I'm also used to talking through screens these days. Stu, you have a great idea of how we can engage people?
I think a great way to do that is to start touching your mouse. Let's get a survey going here just to start us off. What we'd like to find out with our survey is, has your team created personas or journey maps to help your marketing efforts? There should be a survey window that opens up over next to the chat bot, and we'll see what the results are in about 30 seconds.
This is exciting. We should have brought some noodling music.
Yeah, I think we're missing Jeopardy music in the background right now. Okay. Has your team created personas or journey maps? And we're coming up toward the end of the poll time. And Laura, whenever you're ready, let's see what our results are today. All right, 7% of you say that you have them. That's terrific. That's a really great outcome on that. But here's a question. Has your team actually used them in the last 6 months? Again, the poll starts now.
I think inherent in this question, Stu, is do we have them is one question. Like, have we ever done personas? But are we actually using them, especially at this time, given all the changes and adaptations that healthcare is needing to make to respond to this pandemic, and seeing if these personas are actually still being updated and adapted and being used?
Yep, and in fact, that's a terrific point, and we're going to see that come on. The thing about personas, oh, hey, our surveyor, okay, so 2/3 responded they haven't used them. So, okay, we kind of hope that today's presentation might cause you to take those personas off the shelf and dust them off a bit. So to tee us off, Chandra's going to go through our objectives for the presentation.
Great. So we're really excited to show you today how you can discover more about your consumers to create more successful digital campaigns, better websites, and just better digital user experience. That success really comes from being able to talk to your consumers rather than at them. Today, you're going to learn about how using personas and journey maps can really help build better paths to conversions and to successful results. And lastly, we're going to share with you some real-world examples of how these tools have been used in building successful campaigns and in building websites. So let's take a second and think about what this quote means together. I'll read it for you. Personally, I'm very fond of strawberries and cream, but I have found that for some strange reason, fish prefer worms. Well, when you think about that, we tend to think about this quote to help remind us that it's absolutely natural to view the world from the lens of your own perspective. That's just human nature. And I think that's not too different in healthcare marketing. There's often this tendency to think solely from the perspective of your organization. You might be thinking more about how your consumers, what services you offer, and how you differ from your competitors. But the real key to strong marketing and create some really strong digital experiences really goes to understanding who your consumer is. Know what drives that decision-making process for your consumer, and then you need to know how to message them to take a desired action. And I really understand the voice of your consumer is through personas. And based on that survey we just did, it seems about nearly 75% of you have created personas in the past. But have you thought how personas could enhance your marketing and organizational goals? Want to drive patient volume? I think everybody here will definitely say that they want to. Well, personas can give you a deeper understanding of your perspective and existing patient needs and concerns, and most importantly, how can you address them? If you're looking to build loyalty and retention, you use personas to humanize your consumers. This is really going to help you identify content that they want to know, say for your blog or for your website. You can also understand what channels they use and when on their healthcare journey they hear them. So you can make sure you're messaging exactly what they need to hear and exactly what's going to resonate best. And if you're looking to improve your contribution margins, having internal consistency is absolutely key. Personas really give you one unified understanding of the consumer to help you message them and create this more seamless and frictionless experience that consumers are going to want, especially in this post-COVID world. And that's creating an experience that's not just digital, but even offline. And this is going to give you ways to identify all the ways you can engage with them. Have you ever wondered why it's really so important to give a persona a name? Well, you know, by giving a persona a name, you move from just simple demographic data to really humanizing that consumer experience. You create empathy for their needs. They become more relatable to you. You understand that there are a whole bunch of different pain points and challenges and desires and motivations that you need to take into consideration. You can tailor your messaging, your website navigation, your design, the imagery and content, and even your campaign ads to really speak to those needs and challenges. And lastly, you can get a really up-close view of a particular episode in that consumer's journey. That's going to give you deeper analysis and deeper understanding of how to address their needs. At Perficient, we build our personas in various ways. At the minimum, we always like to use internal workshops with key stakeholders, those who have worked directly with the targeted consumer or patient group. We like to use industry research, market research, analytic segmentation, and if it's possible, we love to be able to look at patient volume data. But if you really want to go deeper, if you really want to be able to validate the voice of your consumer, you should really aim to include focus groups, patient interviews, or website usability testing to really give you that deeper understanding, really give your consumer a voice. So in short, personas really help make your consumers relatable and understood. You understand their emotions, their goals, their challenges, and really what's most important to them when they're making a decision. You have a working description. You've built kind of a common language to help both understand and explain who your target audience is, far more than you could do with just demographic data. And even more, you have the base for creating journey maps, which are going to then help you build a narrative of all the key moments within a prospective patient's decision path. And with a built persona, you have this working model that really tells you who you're speaking to and how you can work to really create a digital experience that's going to resonate and connect with them.
Okay, thank you, Chandra. Now that you've given an overview on creating personas, put them to work. Knowing who you want to talk to is important. Knowing when to talk to them and what message to deliver is the next step towards success. So we're going to look at a couple of numbers and statistics here. It's kind of easy to fall into the trap of looking at website performance at a session level. They visited, they left. We often ask, how did a visitor behave during their visit? And in fact, analytics platforms are themselves session-based, which kind of encourages this entire way of thinking about how our websites behave. Well, it's a little different though. This is the thing. A Google and Compete study found that on average, a consumer will perform 15.3 searches before committing to a healthcare appointment. That's more than a dozen potential interactions with your site or your competitor sites. And sometimes the interactions happen all in one day. Other times they can stretch across a month or more. It just depends on the consumer's sense of urgency. Now, when it comes to booking an appointment online, most healthcare websites have about a 3.5% conversion rate. So that means for every 1,000 visits to the website during a day, 35 appointments will likely be made. To many site managers, that means 96.5% of the day's sessions took no valuable action. But that's not quite right. Many of the day's visitors are only on step 3 or maybe step 10 along their decision path. These site visits have extreme value. They are our opportunity to guide, engage, and assist. If we choose not to meet them in their moment, we can lose these early stage decision makers to our competition. And that potential loss is the greatest cost of not knowing your consumers very well. Every day, 96% of our site visitors are still considering their options. They are ours to lose or nurture. To kind of drive home that this is true, here are some conversion paths toward making an appointment from a healthcare website. It is truly a multi-touch journey. All 3 paths are of equal value since they all resulted in an appointment. Now, the thing is, nearly half of the visitors to the average healthcare website will have 2 or more sessions before they convert. Now, the 6-session visitor at the top of the chart, that was all in one day. The 51 session person down at the bottom is something of an outlier, that's true. But we can find similar examples in almost any 30-day time frame. The next thing we have to recognize is not only is it a multi-touch world that we live in, there's also multiple states for the consumer to be in. As you might imagine, there's been a lot of research time invested in understanding how people make decisions. This model represented on the slide is the product of one such study. And it nicely underscores a key takeaway. There is emotion tied to every point along the consumer's decision path. And if we don't want to sound tone deaf, we need to consider our prospects' emotions in how we use messaging. So, to reiterate, we need to talk to our consumers. And on top of that, healthcare is very personal. Shouldn't our marketing be the same? Of course it should be. We are more successful marketers when we talk to our prospects and not at them. Now, we've gained some insight from developing a persona. We kind of understand the emotions that may be involved at different steps along their decision path. And given that bit of empathy, we're better set up to create a journey map that describes their process from discovering they have a need to making an appointment. Let's take a look at healthcare marketing then. And by the way, then was just a few years ago, to tell you the truth. It's changed a lot in the past several years. It was not too long ago, many digital healthcare marketers focused only on a small part of the patient journey. We concentrated on the pointy end of that conversion funnel, trying to lure that last click to our own doctors or services. In many cases, we were able to get away with this because our competitor down the street used the same tactics. But today, our competition isn't just the hospital down the street or across town. It's the much larger hospital in a nearby metropolitan area, or more recently, Perhaps the competition is the national provider networks being built today around telehealth. So in today's more competitive marketplace, we need to reach our prospects as often as we can and as early as we can. To do this, acknowledge the entire journey. To achieve growth, we look to break down some of the silos, such as those between traditional marketing, digital marketing, and in-person experience. We work to better understand the moments in the journey where we can engage and encourage our prospects using the best possible message. The other thing we do is we identify where friction exists in the journey, and we try to reduce it or eliminate it. Friction can be gaps in site content in our engagement plans. Friction can be a complex form that's difficult to complete on a mobile device. And really, one of the most common friction, asking somebody to do something on the web page and then not giving them the tool to do it. There's no call to action. So, Chandra, what we'd like to do is have you give us an overview of what journey maps are all about.
Stu, I would be happy to. When you think of a journey map, you know, the great way to think about this is think about how you use a GPS on your phone when you're traveling. Journey maps are really just a way to kind of visualize a consumer's journey from point A, which could be, say, researching about a condition online, to point B, making an appointment or having that procedure. Journey maps are really a way to gather a series of their actions and their decisions within a certain timeline. They can really help, as Stu has said before, pinpoint specific touch points within a consumer's journey. They're going to surface gaps in how your organization engages with them. That's going to be both digitally and operationally, as well as identify some opportunities to provide a better digital engagement and experience. And once you actually have that journey map completed, you can identify the best channels and marketing tactics for engagement, helping you not only drive conversion and improve their experience, but in a competitive health marketplace, you're going to really be able to differentiate yourself from your competitors. Ultimately, your journey map really keeps you on the road, staying focused, always on the changing needs of your consumer.
Okay, so what would a presentation be without a chart? So here's one, a journey mapping chart. This is going to be blank. We'll show you one that's completed here in a few slides. But journey mapping can start on a chart just like this. Now, it's deceptively simple, yet it takes a good deal of thought to complete. Chandra and I have gone through this process multiple times, and we're always surprised by how we go about thinking about this much more readily when we have the persona in mind. Further, if the journey is more than one person, we need to make a unique chart for each one of those personas. Now, consider orthopedics and knee surgeries. On one hand, there's me, an older person with arthritic knees, kind of hobbling my way toward a knee replacement. Then we have Chandra, a younger person who's an athlete with a torn meniscus. We both want prospects to make an appointment, but there couldn't be two more different paths. So help the team develop goal. They act as touch points to make sure it's rowing in some direction. Most come from personas and journey mapping. They act as a continual that we aren't trying to drive clicks, pages, and brand recall lift. We're trying to see the people on the other side of our content or ad copy and reach out to them in the most human way. So next up, Chandra is going to lead us through a review of 3 initiatives where personas and journey maps paved the way to success.
So, as Stu said, after learning about personas and journey maps, I'd like to take you through a couple of real-world examples. So our first example is a plastic and reconstructive surgery website. And our client approached us with a really specific challenge that, in my experience as a healthcare marketer over the past 20 years, and I'm sure you may have experienced this as well, is a request for the off-site website, or what we call the rogue website from your clinicians. In this case, their plastic surgeons were really concerned about being able to compete in their market, and they wanted to create their own website so it could be much more retail-like, have a very different look and feel, and kind of match what their competitors were doing. Our digital marketing client wanted to remove the risk of a rogue website, which would create all kinds of misunderstanding and potentially have surgeons be really unsatisfied with their website. So rogue plastic surgery site would never be as searchable as their home hospital website. So it might not actually get the results these clinicians were actually after.
So our approach was a persona-driven approach, which would be appropriate for this presentation. We created what we called a conversion-centered content program. This is an omni-channel strategy that touches almost anything that could come in contact with the prospective patient. Since we had a very good idea of who we were trying to talk to and the questions they needed to have answered, we could do a content audit trying to find gaps and friction. We helped with an operational review, kind of like secret shopper calling, if you will, as an example. Then we studied other successful sites and learned how to design both visually and at a good level. And we always looked at for opportunities to get out of our own way. I mentioned call to action earlier. For example, does every page have that call to action and the means to answer that call? Again, you'd be surprised how many times page content reads, make an appointment today, but there's no form on the page or the phone numbers aren't click to call enabled. And then finally, we knew that content was going to take some time to earn organic ranking. So we primed the pump with digital ads tailored for each persona and journey touch point.
So before we developed personas, one of the first actions we took was to really identify the target audiences for the site. This is where we partnered with our client and really decided upon three. One would be women over 50 looking to appear more youthful. One was going to be people over 30 who wanted plastic surgery but were really concerned about the cost. And lastly were women who wanted to have breast reconstructive surgery post-mastectomy. One of those particular personas that we created was Amelia. This would be our persona for women seeking reconstructive surgery post-mastectomy. We considered her goals to look and feel like herself before her mastectomy, and then think about what her pain points and challenges were so that we could really think about how to help her make this decision. So this is the map that Stu just showed you before, completely filled out with Amelia's journey as she starts to make her own decisions about whether or not to have reconstructive surgery. We really did this. We started to think about what was really important to her, starting with her ultimate goal that she wanted to feel, look like herself before surgery, and where her emotions were throughout this journey as she made her decision. So if you start with her first action, and then you start with her first goal, you see that it leads her to a place of feeling excited, scared, and unsure. So her first action is that she's going to search online for best breast reconstructive plastic surgeons near her. Her second step is going to then take her to think about that she might just be a little bit closer and ready to meet us and really help her to feel whole again. So at this particular point, she's a little bit more anxious, and now she might go and talk to friends in her breast cancer support group for recommendations. Now, one of the last challenges and the gaps that's going to hold her back from making a decision about surgery is really about the challenges around cost of surgery. So this is the place where she's going to, and she's going to do some comparison shopping online. She's going to want to learn about general cost for surgery. And lastly, as she finally is ready to have her reconstruction, get back to being herself, she's feeling more prepared, she's feeling more certain, and she's ready to actually visit a plastic surgeon. So how does this all look when we start to think about the website? We knew we needed to revamp the entire plastic surgery website with all three personas in mind, starting with the main navigation on the site, which we call the informational architecture. Thinking specifically about prospective reconstructive surgery patients like Amelia, we wanted to make sure the website had the content Amelia needed to help her take the step to surgery. The original site really appeared in black. We revamped the navigation of the site into these new content buckets, which now appear in green. And then for our persona, particularly for Amelia, we really start to think about what she needed to know. And we knew that she was going to need to know the expertise of the plastic surgeons, that she wanted to understand what was involved in the process of having breast reconstructive surgery. She needed to know how to finance the surgery, which is a major concern for her. And lastly, she wanted to know how she would be able to convert and actually schedule a consultation. So here we have,
I'm sorry. What we see on the left is the original plastic page. It was built on a very successful template that in other service lines is efficient and effective in earning leads or appointments. But after assessing the personas we were trying to reach, everyone on the team thought we could do better. So we changed the design and created a unique aesthetic for the plastic service line. We wanted a boutique look and feel, imagery that aligned more with fashion than clinical. And most of all, we wanted to get prospects acquainted with the surgeons early on. So we promoted videos of the surgeons on the front page. The doctors also offered a line of skin rejuvenation products, which previously had been more of a bullet in a bullet list. And the new design borrowed the look and feel of a magazine spread for cosmetics. As we noted earlier, it takes time for new content to rank in organic search. We launched a highly targeted campaign promoting 3 or more profitable services. Our goal was to drive traffic to the new content and monitor behavior to see if our forecasts in the journey map were correct. Now, after the plastic and reconstructive content earned ranking in Google and Bing, things paused. So after we've gone through this process, what were some of the results? When we start comparing non-paid traffic before and after the update to the plastics section, there was an 86% increase in page views. There was a 72% increase in entrances. These are non-paid entrances directly onto the plastics content. The bounce rate dropped from 11% to 6.8%. There's a 136% increase in average page views per session. The prospect was provided more content to look at, read, and understand, and then full advantage of it. There's a 35% increase in conversions. More people were filling out that consultation request form after the update compared to before. And final and most gratifying of the happenings was that the happy surgeons, the plastics leadership thanked marketing and agreed it was a better outcome than what they had planned. So Chandra, here comes the next one for you.
Great. This is a great one. So for the past 20 years, a key service line that I've always enjoyed working on as a healthcare marketer and here at Perficient has always been OBGYN and maternity. In this example, our client partner wanted our help to increase the volume of prospective mothers using their maternity and OBGYN services. They also want to really be able to improve both patient engagement and experience of their existing patients on their website. And then they wanted to create more content and assistance for mothers with high-risk pregnancies, a particular target audience that they knew that they really wanted to improve their experience. So after working with and interviewing with several of their patients, we got to thinking that we should create two different journey maps and 2 different personas for this particular service area. We developed 2 journey maps, one for high risk and one for low risk mothers-to-be, looking at their entire journey from deciding on their OB through post-labor and delivery. In particular, we learned from our high-risk persona that high-risk moms-to-be, like Jessica, wanted a supportive but authoritative healthcare partner to really help navigate their pregnancies. They want a healthcare partner to be their guru, helping them to cut through that din of advice from their friends, their family, and social media. Secondly, they needed to know the scariest parts of their pregnancy much, much sooner in their journey so that they could feel more prepared if something negative occurred. And lastly, they wanted to feel the excitement about their pregnancy, just like low-risk mothers-to-be. And they wanted a healthcare partner who could really share that joy and that excitement. So our client will actually be launching their site with a lot of new content and new navigation that really is going to meet the needs of both their prospective and their existing patients, including meeting the needs specifically for that high-risk mother-to-be patient. Calls to actions will really stress their supportive tools, such as their 24-hour referral line and their pregnancy app. And the overall tone of the entire website will really change to be even more supportive and joyful as their consumers desire. So in addition to building a site that really is going to meet their consumer needs, this site, we were able to work this team to really have clear alignment on the development of their website. Developing content and design is a much faster process. And we were able to identify some future opportunities for improving the overarching digital experience of all of their patients. And lastly, we have an example from the healthcare insurance world that I'd like to share with you. We call this one the tale of Bob the insurance switcher. So in this particular case, the client very much wanted to drive more revenue by helping a key target audience, this one in particular being insurance switchers from one of their competitors. And they wanted to make sure that this particular audience had an easier conversion process. This was a target audience they didn't have a lot of understanding of, especially what would actually drive them to convert to their insurance products. So we decided to create Bob, the switcher, and we called him G-Bob. And really, this is a customer with similar demographics to their existing customers, so that we could better understand not only his challenges in switching insurance providers, but what Bob, the switcher, needed to really consider their insurance products and ultimately convert to become a member. So in addition to all of the three key personas that we looked at for the website, in particular, we wanted to really map out Bob the switcher. We mapped out Bob to really understand his challenges and needs. And for insurance switchers like Bob, they really were seeking out a better customer experience that was going to be seamless and effortless, and it was going to be a very simplified enrollment process that they were looking for. And now, understanding that our persona Bob really likes simplicity and ease finding information, we really tried to simplify the website to ensure he'll be able to get what he wanted. We created a page specifically for those seeking to switch insurance providers. We reduced the number of pages related to enrollment, and we made it easy for someone like Bob to quickly contact a real customer agent no matter where he was on the website. So for Bob, we knew he wanted options for enrollment, but he really didn't want to spend a lot of time on a website to learn how to enroll. Reducing all of the enrollment options to a single page makes it really easy for switchers like Bob to make it to convert. And he's not left alone in the process. You know, we've included content to help him understand what the next steps would be and able to enroll in whatever option he chose. And then most health insurance websites, especially those for Medicare, for those who know, can be really content heavy. So we wanted to really help Bob make the ability to compare and contrast our clients' websites and our clients' products against his current and existing insurance products and understand what the out-of-pocket cost difference would be. Bob can review all of our clients' products on a single page without having to search through a numerous amounts of different pages on a website. And then, of course, lastly, if Bob ever really feels that he needs to speak to someone directly, he has the option, looking to the left, just click on the box and talk to someone online or make a call. So after developing all of these personas, our client is actually moving really, really fast through the website build process. They're getting faster approval amongst their stakeholders on important pieces like the informational architecture and their sitemap. And our website developers and designers are able to wireframe, and they're already starting to work on building the site much, much earlier than forecasted. And now they now have amongst themselves kind of this unified language or understanding of this consumer that can now be used in developing their website, but also in future marketing and customer experience efforts. The big thing is that this is also going to help them in a very, very competitive healthcare insurance market get into market faster and hopefully be able to convert more people like Bob to their products.
Thank you, Chandra. Okay, so final takeaways from me. During today's presentation, we discovered the value of creating and maintaining personas, plus the added value of going beyond simple demographic definitions. Because the better developed our personas are, the easier it becomes to create those journey maps. We learned that journey maps help visualize contact points along the consumer's decision path, including the channels and content to be used to connect with our prospects at each step. As well-developed journey maps help keep all the marketing team's moving parts aligned on the same messaging and focused on earning the amount. And then finally, Chandra listed of several examples where perhaps set up a service line and two site results. So in the long run, knowing our consumers well, understanding how and when to talk to them. We've lost revenue and spent money by executing more projects. Thank you for your time. And what questions do you have?
Yes, thank you so much for all those great insights. Great presentation. At this point, I'd like to open it up for questions. Please submit your questions to me, Laura Clemens, through the chat box on the right side, and note if there is any specific presenter you'd like to you want to respond to your question, then let me know. Okay, we do have a few questions. The first one is, how many personas would I need to build a website?
Sure, I take that. This is Chandra. So I think the question that you want to ask yourself first is, what are the KPIs for your website and who is your target audience? That's ultimately going to help you figure out how many personas you're going to need to really consider your website. So for example, for a typical hospital, especially if you're thinking about it's going to be probably consumer facing, you may think that you're going to need at least one or two, one for prospective, one for existing patients. You may be thinking about referring physicians. If you're a medical, if you're an academic center as well, you may be thinking about medical students, fellows, residents, and you may also have research as well. So you may be thinking about researchers. So you really want to think about all of the key audiences that you have. Now that's a lot of audiences, no question, and that's a lot of personas that you could make. You could even go as far as thinking about down to the service line level. So what I would always suggest is with your leadership to start thinking about how you prioritize. Who are the key target audiences based on your goals as an organization and your business needs, and then kind of prioritized based on that alone.
Okay, great. Here's another one. I'm more used to demographic personas that are centered around age, income, and interest. What does this approach get me that those personas do not?
Okay, actually, it's a very good question. The one way to look at it is most of the demographic personas that we would build, you could find most of that data built right into Google Analytics. You're going to find out gender, you're going to find out age range, and several other points there. The problem is that is really very general. We're not addressing the emotional need. We're not addressing the different points of decisions somebody has to make from start to end. Demographics doesn't really help us understand that part. We don't know that early on, perhaps the prospect needs a more encouraging message. They need a message that says, hey, we're here for you, and that's enough. Demographics won't tell us what they're feeling at the moment when they decide that, yes, they're ready to commit to making having an operation or making an appointment. What feeling? It doesn't inform how to speak to the person. So by doing this little bit of, let's say, role playing to come up with what the persona is, it does reshape most of the marketing we do, and that encompasses everything, by the way, from the posters in the elevator to the homepage banner at the top, to the search ad text that you send out across Google search and so on.
Yeah, I would add that the segments are demographically driven, and so segments are useful for targeting, but a segment, you know, you could reduce all of healthcare to a 35 to 55-year-old woman who's making decisions for everyone in their home, right? That's the demographic. But if that person is making a decision for her parents or making a decision for her spouse or for her children, she's going to behave differently. So it's the same segment, it's the same demographic, but they will act differently in those scenarios, and the interactions and opportunities you have to influence them are really different depending upon what actions they're taking. So personas are really about understanding what that consumer journey is like and making sure that we're helping support all the decisions so that they don't fall out. Demographics is really just a way to target maybe an initial offer and not try to speak to everyone. But this is kind of a next step among a digital maturity model than just demographics, which are a great place to start.
So here's a question: if someone has separate websites, one for adults and one for pediatrics, in March, our pediatric brand inherited 16 new service lines in late March during coronavirus when volumes nationwide were low. How do we build personas without much information?
That's a good one.
That's a great question. Well, I'll start, and maybe Stu and Chandra will chime in. I think the best thing is we have a bunch of information. So Google Analytics, as Stu is saying, gives us a lot of insight into the behaviors of people interacting with your marketing, your site content, and even we can look at that information to understand some basic demographic data. So I think we always start knowing that there's a lot more information, and it's about translating that information to something that's actionable. So a typical way to address a concern is we actually run persona workshops. They're like half days to really talk about where can we influence people the most. So it's not like you want to have your personas cover 100% of your patients. It's actually, there's probably a couple strategic service lines that need growth, or strategic service lines that are underperforming. That's actually where to focus your energy around personas. So oftentimes it's picking which of those are the ones that really are having issues, either connecting with existing patients or finding new ones or explaining how the services will fit together. Usually we're looking for where the problems are, and we start there, and then we kind of, and then we work to refine them.
Yeah, and that's kind of what that's actually a great plan. You start with what you know, and you test your way to success. Personas aren't static; they're a work in progress, like pretty much all of us are. And one way I've discussed this with people is think of it more along this way: we're dating our personas; we're not married to them. It's possible for these personas to change because the needs change in the moment.
Great. We also have another question. How can I help leadership understand the need for personas? It's often tough to get budget for things like this.
Another great question. The simplest way that we found is actually to take a look at what existing spend is happening and do some models of how much more effective marketing investments could be. So so our answer commonly is to take a look at, for example, what a digital marketing investment looks like for a client and try to figure out where we can find areas of improvement and do personas as a necessary part of that. And we've proven it, and we've proven the ROI. So we're able to show double-digit cost reduction, double-digit conversion rate growth. We can say, oh, we did that because we focused on some personas. Now we should apply it to other things. So oftentimes if there's a lack of willingness to invest, finding where you're doing marketing that could be improved measurably, and using, again, these kind of persona workshops are fairly light in terms of investment of resources, to be able to build some initial personas that are really campaign focused helps us get better outcomes, and that makes the case for organizational change. So we found that to be successful. Second, the other way is it becomes missional, where it's clear that there's a population that's not being reached, and there's data or awareness within the organization that we really need to go and engage this population. And that's a case where organizations who feel like this is a nice to have will suddenly feel like it's really important if they're missing some key metrics somewhere.
Excellent. If there are any questions, please submit now. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our speakers for a great presentation and Perficient for sponsoring this webinar. Please remember there is a brief survey following the conclusion. If there are not any more questions, then please feel free to contact myself or any of the presenters if you do think of something, and we'll help you in any way that we can. This will be the conclusion of the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you
for having us.